Subscribe now if you're brave enough to keep watching. It was just another ordinary evening, or so it seemed when Tom Reynolds, a weary traveling businessman, pulled into the parking lot of the Grandview Hotel. The late-night drive from the airport had left him exhausted, his eyes heavy with fatigue. He didn't think much of the hotel when he saw the faded sign above the entrance. It looked a bit outdated, but he was too tired to care. It was the only place nearby that had an available room for the night. The front desk clerk, a young woman with dark circles under her eyes, handed him the key and pointed him toward the room 217, one of the hotel's older rooms on the second floor. When Tom stepped into the room, a chill seemed to settle in the air. He shivered, pulling his jacket tighter around himself. The room was dimly lit by a single lamp, casting long shadows that made the walls appear as though they were closing in. There was an unsettling quietness that seemed to hang in the air, a silence that almost felt suffocating. The bed, although made up neatly, had an old, worn-out feel to it, and the curtains swayed slightly, despite the fact that the window was closed. The television was off, but the static sound from the old screen made him feel uneasy, as though it was waiting for him to press play. Tom brushed it off, deciding he'd had enough of the long journey. He unpacked his things and plopped down onto the bed, hoping to get some rest before his meeting the next morning. But as soon as he closed his eyes, the feeling of being watched crept over him. He sat up quickly, looking around the room, but nothing seemed out of place. Yet, the feeling wouldn't go away. He stood up, grabbed the television remote, and clicked it on, hoping to distract himself. The static on the screen intensified, the hiss growing louder, until a faint, almost inaudible whisper cut through the noise. "Get out!" Tom's heart skipped a beat, his breath caught in his throat. He turned off the television, trying to shake the feeling of dread that had settled in his chest. But it was no use. The silence in the room now felt heavy, oppressive, as though the walls were closing in on him. He lay back down, trying to ignore the cold feeling crawling up his spine. But as he lay there in the dark, he could swear he heard the faint sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from just outside his room. When Tom got up to check, the hallway was empty. The only sound was the faint hum of the fluorescent lights above. But as he turned back toward his room, something stopped him. The door to room 217 was slightly ajar. He had locked it when he came in. Or had he? Tension built in the pit of his stomach as he cautiously pushed the door open. The room was still and quiet. But then, as his eyes adjusted to the dark, he saw something that made his blood run cold, the reflection of his own face in the mirror above the dresser. Except it wasn't just his face. There was something else standing behind him, something tall, dark, and featureless. Tom turned quickly, but the room was empty. The reflection in the mirror, however, remained. A faint figure, moving ever so slightly, as though it was watching him. Just as he was about to step away from the mirror, the door slammed shut behind him with a force that made the walls shake. Tom's heart pounded in his chest, and he backed away from the door trying to breathe. The whisper returned, louder this time, as if it was coming from all directions. "Don't leave." Tom felt the weight of the room closing in on him, the air thick with a presence he couldn't see but could feel, pressing in from every angle. Panic began to rise in his chest. He had to get out. The hotel wasn't just old and creepy. It was alive with something sinister. something that had been waiting for him. But as he made his way toward the door, the lights flickered once more, and the static on the television came alive again, louder, more frantic. And then, just before he reached the door, the whispering voice became clear. "You're not leaving, Tom." And that's when the lights went out completely. The door rattled once more, but this time it wasn't Tom shaking the handle. Something was trying to get in, something that wasn't supposed to be in room 217. But before he could react, the sound of footsteps much closer now came from behind him. Tom spun around, but all he saw was the reflection of his own terrified face staring back at him from the mirror. Tom's breath hitched as he stared at the mirror, his own wide-eyed reflection staring back at him in horror. He quickly turned away from the mirror, but the air in the room felt thick, almost suffocating. The sounds of his panicked breathing were drowned by an eerie hum that began to reverberate from the walls, a low vibration that seemed to come from the very foundation of the hotel. His eyes darted to the door, still locked, the handle rattling once more. The whisper returned, softer now, like a voice speaking from the shadows. "You don't belong here." Tom was no longer sure what to believe. Was he hearing things? Was this all a product of exhaustion, the stress of the long trip and his desperate need for rest? Or was something truly amiss in this forsaken hotel? The air seemed to grow colder, and the lights flickered again, casting the room into darkness. A feeling of dread washed over him, a primal fear that made his skin crawl. There was something in the room with him, something that wasn't human. His heart pounded as he moved toward the door, determined to leave the room. But as he reached for the handle, the temperature dropped even further. A gust of cold air rushed past him, carrying the scent of decay and dampness. The door, once locked, was now ajar. But it wasn't just the door that opened. The walls seemed to shift around him, the space in the room stretching and warping as if the very architecture was bending in on itself. Tom stepped back, his hand shaking as he reached for the light switch. But when his fingers brushed the switch, the lights didn't come back on. Instead, the room grew darker still. He turned around, the hairs on the back of his neck standing up. The mirror was now fogged over, and within the condensation, faint figures began to form. At first, they were indistinct, like shadows, but they slowly began to take shape the forms of people, faces, their eyes hollow and unblinking, staring directly at him. Suddenly, the whispers grew louder, clearer, like dozens of voices speaking in unison. "We warned you." Tom felt his stomach drop. His instincts screamed at him to get out of there, but the more he moved, the more he felt trapped. He turned toward the window, hoping for an escape. But the moment he stepped closer, he saw something that made his blood run cold. Outside the window, standing motionless in the parking lot, was a figure. Its features were hidden in the darkness, but the way it stood, unnaturally still, seemed to mock his every movement. The figure was watching him, waiting. His pulse quickened as he stumbled back from the window. His mind raced. How could anyone be out there at this hour? And why did it feel like the figure was somehow connected to the horrors in room 217? Tom could no longer ignore the truth. There was something deeply wrong with the hotel, and he had no idea what kind of sinister force he had invited into his life. The whispers continued, their voices now growing more urgent, more insistent. "Leave, or you'll be next." He couldn't stand it anymore. Without thinking, Tom grabbed his suitcase, his phone, and rushed toward the door. But just as his hand grasped the handle, it jerked away. The door slammed shut on its own, trapping him inside. The room went pitch black. He felt the floor beneath him shift. The walls seemed to close in, and the heavy, oppressive air filled his lungs. His breath was shallow, panic setting in. Then, just as quickly as it all started, everything went silent. The whispers, the rattling door, the oppressive feeling in the air all vanished. But it wasn't over. No, not yet. Suddenly, the lights flickered on just for a split second. And when they came back on, Tom saw something that made his blood run cold. Standing in the corner of the room was a figure. A man, or something that looked like one, his features twisted and distorted. His mouth was open, a gaping hole, and a voice echoed through Tom's mind. "You should have listened." The man's figure was like a shadow cast by some unseen light, his form growing more distinct with each passing second. His eyes were hollow, and his smile was wide, unnatural, a grotesque and predatory grin that stretched too far across his face. And then Tom heard it again, the voice. But this time it wasn't a whisper. It was clear, commanding. "Get out." But the door was locked. The window was sealed shut. There was no way out. He was trapped. As Tom backed away, desperate to escape, the figure in the corner took a slow, deliberate step forward, its dark eyes fixed on him. The room, once a place of safety, now felt like a prison, a place designed to keep him there forever. The walls seemed to close in again, and Tom's heart raced, his mind screaming for release. But the man continued to advance, inch by inch, each step closer to him. And with each step, Tom could feel the weight of the air pressing against him, pushing him into the corner. And then darkness. The light flickered one last time, and Tom was gone, just like that. But when the hotel staff entered room 217 the next morning, they found it exactly as it had been untouched. The bed was neatly made, the door was still locked, the window was still closed. But one thing was different, the mirror. The condensation had cleared, and in its reflection was a figure standing behind the mirror, its face twisted in a horrific grin. But no one was in the room. The staff left the room untouched, too afraid to enter. The hotel, it seemed, had claimed Anoa, her victim. And room 217 would continue to haunt those who dared to stay in it. To this day, no one stays in room 217. The hotel remains open, but the room is sealed off. The whispers still linger in the halls. And every once in a while, guests swear they hear the faint echo of a voice, "Leave, or you'll be next." If you've made it this far, you're in for a revelation that will make you rethink every hotel room you ever stayed in. But beware, you may not like what you discover. Weeks passed after Tom's disappearance, but the hotel, its eerie silence, and the whispers in the hallways never stopped. Guests who stayed there began to report strange occurrences. Objects moved, windows fogged up without reason, and the faint sounds of someone walking through the halls late at night. But it wasn't until one particular night that the horror truly escalated. A young couple, newlyweds on their honeymoon, had checked into the hotel. They were given room 217, unaware of its terrifying reputation. The staff, who were well aware of the room's curse, tried to warn them, but it was too late. The couple dismissed the warnings with laughter, thinking it was nothing more than superstition. Around midnight, they were awoken by loud knocks on the door. The husband, still half asleep, groggily answered it, but no one was there. At first he thought it was a prank, but as he stepped into the hallway, he noticed something strange. The air was cold, almost freezing, and the hallway lights flickered as if they were on the brink of going out. He quickly returned to the room, locking the door behind him. But the temperature continued to drop. The wife, now wide awake, wrapped herself in a blanket. But the feeling of being watched grew stronger. She tried to reassure herself, but deep down, something wasn't right. Then the whispering started. At first, it was just a faint murmur, but soon the voices grew louder, more insistent. They were speaking in unison, echoing through the walls. "You should leave. Leave now." Terrified, the couple called the front desk, but the phone line was dead. The husband tried to open the door to leave, but it wouldn't budge. It was as if something or someone was holding it shut. Panic set in as the voices grew more frantic, and the room grew colder. Suddenly, the lights went out, plunging them into total darkness. In the silence that followed, they could hear the unmistakable sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, and approaching them from the shadows. The wife screamed, and her husband frantically searched for his phone, only to realize it too had gone dead. The next sound they heard was the scraping of nails against the door as if something was trying to get in. The wife clung to her husband, whispering in desperation, "What is happening? What's in the room with us?" And then they heard it, a voice low, guttural, and unmistakably clear. "Leave, or you will stay forever." In that moment, the door flew open with a violent force, sending them both crashing to the floor. They scrambled to get up, but when they looked back at the door, there was nothing. No one standing in the hallway. No signs of an intruder. They ran out of the room, their hearts pounding in their chests. But when they right on the elevator, it wouldn't move. The lights flickered once more, and the walls seemed to close in on them. Every corner of the hotel felt suffocating, like it was alive and watching them. They had no choice but to run down the stairs. As they passed room 217, they couldn't help but look inside through the small crack in the door. The sight they saw made their blood run cold. In the dim light, they could see a shadowy figure standing in the center of the room, staring at them with hollow eyes. A slow, menacing smile spread across its face. The couple bolted out of the hotel, never looking back. They never returned, and the hotel staff was forced to deal with the aftermath. The room was now permanently sealed off, but the whispers persisted. The once innocent hotel had now become a place of horror and darkness. No one dared to step foot in Rooted, and 217 again. The couple bolted out of the hotel, never looking back. They never returned, and the hotel staff was forced to deal with the aftermath. The room was now permanently sealed off, but the whispers persisted. The once innocent hotel had now become a place of horror and darkness. No one dared to step foot in room 217 again. It was as if the room itself was alive, feeding on the fear of those who stayed there, trapping them in an endless cycle of terror. Many tried to investigate, but every time someone dared enter, they were never seen again. The few who made it out alive, like Tom before them, were never the same. The hotel became a place that no one wanted to remember, its sinister legacy continuing to haunt the streets. To this day, there are rumors that the whispers still echo through the halls, especially near room 217. Some guests who stay in nearby rooms have reported hearing muffled voices, footsteps in the hallway, and the cold chill that seems to never leave. And for those who are brave enough to stay in the hotel, the one warning they all receive is the same: do not stay in room 217, or you'll never leave. As for Tom, the truth of what happened to him may never be known, but one thing is certain: room 217 continues to claim souls, and it's waiting for its next victim. If this story haunts you, hit subscribe, because the next one will make you question everything you know about fear.